Listen to me. That is not the Dale Cooper that I knew.
Please tell me exactly what you mean.
It isn't time passing, or how he's changed, or the way he looks. It's something here. Or something that definitely isn't here.
Welcome to Twin Peaks Rewatch. From Idle Thumbs, I'm Chris Remo.
I'm Jake Rodkin.
On this episode, we are talking about Part 7 of Twin Peaks: The Return.
Part 7 was written by Mark Frost and David Lynch. It was directed by David Lynch, and it first aired on television on June 18th, 2017.
On this episode, Ben Horne finds something that was missing. Hawk and Truman discuss something that was missing. The police visit Cooper and Janie E. to let them know they found something that was missing. Diane interviews Bad Coop, sensing something is missing. Meanwhile, Andy investigates the hit and run, but his suspect goes missing. Lieutenant Knox shows up in Buckhorn expecting to find her evidence missing, but she finds a body with its head missing. Bad Coop blackmails his way into going missing from federal prison, and Jean-Michel Renault is a definite Renault. So that's what happened.
You're not wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. Before we get into plot, which is also what this episode was.
This episode was definite plot.
Any overall thoughts on this whole episode of Twin Peaks?
I almost had whiplash after last week's episode from the sensation of so much stuff happening on this episode. It felt tangibly different to watch. I also, at this point, I am fully in the camp of receiving this show as an 18-hour movie, not as a television show.
Yeah.
The way that it's edited and structured, and the kinds of things Lynch chooses to linger on, sort of details that by any account should be extraneous in a television show. It really feels like stretching a movie out to this length and multiplying the length of everything in the movie to fit that.
Yeah, because there's choices in this. It's you say that, and that's my instinct too at this point. Although a lot of people, because David Lynch uses the phrase 18-hour movie, are just saying, oh, it's like an 18-hour movie. That's never a thing that exists unless you count other than like experimental art movies.
I was
or
totally
something.
resistant to it for that reason. I also don't think that just because a director says something that you should take it, that you should have a credulous attitude to it.
There's also an 18-hour movie doesn't exist regardless of what David Lynch says. Like, that's never been a thing that anyone has tried to do, I don't think.
No,
an 18-hour long narrative film.
It's
so
still
what that means is like...
No, it's true. I guess what I'm saying is it feels as though its priorities tend closer to those taken when you know the audience is going to be watching the entire thing from beginning to end and keeping all the pieces in their head in that way. I mean, we are accustomed now to serialized television in which you absolutely have to keep all the details in your head all the time. But I think an interesting thing to note, maybe in a second, in a rewatch of this season, for instance, would be what are the opening scenes of each episode? Even now, having gotten used to it after 7 episodes, they're not how television uses establishing shots. They feel like scenes that could be in the middle of a movie for tonal purposes rather than sort of an overture to anything that's going to come in this one specific episode. Jerry Horne out in the middle of the woods. Things like that. You could go on and on. I mean, there's lots of examples of that in this season as a whole, and it just feels to me like this season exists as one huge thing in a way that I really don't typically think of television as being, because usually I think when people speak about a television season as being novelistic or cinematic or whatever, it is with a completely linear story that goes from beginning to end. It's like, oh, it's like you took a big long book and chopped it up, serialized, like how Dickens was originally published or something. But that's not actually how this feels to me. It feels like a film which uses heavily nonlinear editing. Even if the story is basically going from beginning to end, the way it's arranged is absolutely
right. I think part of the reason that movies get away with so much that they do, sort of just aesthetically and time-wise and whatever else, is because they assume that the audience is sitting in a dark box and their entire job for the duration of it is to watch it. Like you can have an audience expectation that
and it's a one-off, relatively short experience as opposed to something you're committing to over the course of several months.
But the idea now, during this episode, especially because I was having the same, I think, realizations as you of just this is actually one gigantic thing. I asked myself, am I a human being who would actually pay money to have just gone and sat in a room and watched all of Twin Peaks: The Return in one day?
I couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it either, I don't think, but I wished for a reality where I could just be like, just give it to me. Just give me all of this. Because I feel like because we're seeing this over the course of 15 weeks, the overall arc of it and the context in which we're supposed to be understanding this stuff gets so drawn out that I wonder at this point if it's actually being drawn out beyond what they would have liked. I wonder
the same thing. I mean, we get little flashes of characters who we'll see in one episode, not see them at all for several episodes, and still 7 episodes in, more than a third of the way in, unclear whether they're important at all or whether they're simply there for flavor or whether they're just there as sort of a little bonus for Twin Peaks fans who will recognize them.
Right. It's so hard to know. I didn't think going into this that I would maybe end up ultimately being a proponent of binge watching season 3, basically, but it'll be interesting to be able to.
That's going to be how it's best enjoyed.
I think so too.
I'm watching this show obviously in a sort of artificial way now because I'm taking notes on everything so we can do this podcast. I would imagine if that were not the case, just knowing myself, I'm someone who I have to take these notes because otherwise I won't remember all these little details. And as listeners of this podcast know, sometimes I still mess that up.
More on that.
Right. And so if I were just watching this show completely recreationally, watching these shows, whether binged or at least in closer proximity, would aid me.
Yep, I think so as well.
So on that note, on the note of not keeping details in our heads,
our corrections segments.
Yes, we got quite a few emails from people who completely correctly pointed out that we misstated 2 important things last episode.
Yep.
One, the pair of assassins, the Dougie sort of related hitmen guys, those are not the same people as the debt collectors that Janie E. paid off. Those are just different people. That's sort of a keystone of a big chunk of discussion last week. Sorry about that.
Yep.
And also, we misunderstood something that Hawk was saying in the bathroom. He was not indicating that they're in the women's bathroom. He was suggesting that Chad
should get out of here and go use the ladies' room because Hawk is busy ripping apart the bathroom stall.
Yeah.
To that point, let's get started with one of the biggest meaty things in this meaty episode full of plot meat, which is Hawk and Sheriff Truman 2 talking about what Hawk found in the bathroom. As suspected or hoped for by many people, it turns out that it was a bunch of Laura's missing diary. It was shocking to me how just tangibly gratifying in a dorky Twin Peaks fan way it was to see them just lay those out and read that same text verbatim. I don't know why, but I did not expect that text to ever pop back in verbatim as classic ass Twin Peaks evidence, but I guess it...
Yeah, I mean, this show has in so many ways distanced itself from that really core Laura Palmer through line of Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me, and so it was kind of startling.
Laura's diary coming back, that text coming back, reminded me in either episode 2 or 3, Laura Palmer shows up and talks to Cooper in the Red Room, and then something weird happens, and then Leland shows up and says, "Find Laura." That implies that there's some wrinkle in what's going on with Laura Palmer. Who knows what that will mean? But her journal coming back and being this forward a story element reminded me oh geez, that's right. We saw Laura Palmer in this show already once. Hawk goes full lore blast in this scene.
Yeah.
And true to the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department, they take it all in stride in a way that is almost ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hawk and Truman digging through all this stuff, and Ben Horne getting the room key and sort of re-excavating the Laura Palmer stuff in his mind. What it really did for me was make me miss Agent Dale Cooper, the character that we know from Twin Peaks, a ton. Yeah. Because all of these threads, like all of these characters were never had to be like load-bearing investigation or sort of lore management characters. You always would, if someone found a room key to a hotel room and it meant something important, in the back of your brain in the old show you'd be like, oh man, well when Cooper finds this, he's going to say that. Or like when they find these journal pages, it's like, okay, I'll just get those to Agent Cooper, like have him say something interesting, then get Albert to come in and look at them.
Mess around with it for like 4 weeks, but then let's get it to Cooper.
Like, and it's making some of this stuff feel kind of hollow to me in a way that
I kind of agree.
Like I like seeing it from sort of the like learning new information, whatever. Like my just sort of logical brain is enjoying it, but in my heart, right here, I just like
something missing.
Something's missing. Yeah, and that thing is tearing a gun out of a hitman's hand in a strange way.
Yeah.
Let's see what's next here.
Well, we could go on to Ben Horne and
there's actually a bunch more Truman stuff. I don't know.
That's true. That's a good point.
Because he
calls up.
He makes two phone calls.
Original Truman.
He calls up original Truman in huge quotes.
Yeah.
Because he's just talking into nothing. Because Harry Truman, I guess, isn't in the show, and it seems like he's sick. And it's bad news, and then that is just put to bed quickly. And then he talks to Doc Hayward
on Skype.
On the best Skype of all, because it's a computer monitor that pops up out of a wooden insert in his desk. The best.
Yeah.
The best Twin Peaks technology crossover of all time. He has a cartoon lever that he pulls on his desk. Oh, man.
I also have to say, I did appreciate that it was just stupid Skype.
Yeah.
It wasn't a weird, like, police video chat technology, whatever, made up thing. It was just Skype.
They spent a little too long explaining what Skype was to each other.
Yeah, that was kind of odd, but
And Doc Hayward's Skype name is Middlebury Doc. I didn't have a chance to go look and see if that's actually a registered Skype account. So we should talk about all the things in that scene quickly, I guess.
Yeah.
First off, obviously, it was good to see Warren Frost show up. This is probably, I'm going to guess this is the only footage of Warren Frost that's going to be in the show.
So this episode was dedicated to his memory.
It reminded me very much of the footage they got of Catherine Coulson as the log lady, of just like, Warren Frost is Mark Frost's dad. He suffered apparently a really long battle with Alzheimer's before passing away, which the scene was just generally sort of heartwarming and also sad.
I agree.
Because that guy was one of my favorite characters on Twin Peaks.
Too.
Easily.
Warren Frost put on the most sort of warm, like bittersweet performance consistently
when
on that show.
Like he embodied the real human being stuck in Twin Peaks throughout the good and the bad of that show.
Absolutely.
Including like when things were completely outrageous and stupid and he was just like silently cracking up to himself in the corner in a bunch of season 2. Oh, it's just he's just so good.
Yeah.
And you got just like a tiny glimmer of that.
Mm-hmm. When he smiled, there was a moment later in the conversation where he smiles, and
when he's telling the story about the trouts in his pajamas and stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it was exactly like the classic Warren Frost and Twin Peaks, and I was really happy.
It was really good. He's also there to provide some weird evidence. He's there to say that when Cooper was in the hospital, he got up and Doc Hayward thought that he went and visited Audrey.
Yeah, which
has led to the internet going all the way out and saying, like, is Cooper Richard Horne's dad? Is like that's.
I don't want to get into that.
I don't. Yeah.
All right. Fine. Maybe. Who knows? I don't know anything.
No one knows anything. The other thing, the thing that came to mind for me was, well, like, obviously this is bad Coop, like doppelganger Cooper, who's out and about at that time. The other thing that we know was in the hospital at the same time as him was that Owl Cave ring, which we know that he got back into his possession. So that's like, maybe that's what he was doing. Sure. Or also, who knows? No one knows.
Yep.
Important information is just that he was up and out of the hospital really fast.
Yeah. You want to move on to, speaking of Audrey Horne, the Hornes?
Yeah.
The Horne brothers?
There's some, we open this episode with Jerry Horne lost in the woods, complaining,
seemingly
despondent that his car was stolen.
Right.
And then they have some awkward classic Twin Peaks back and forth that was more awkward than classic.
Yeah, that's true. One of two missing cars this episode. Yeah, Jerry sort of freaking out about being high. Yeah.
And
I never know what to make of these kinds of scenes in this season. I really don't know what to make of them.
Yeah, they never quite work, and I can't tell if they can't. I feel like they never quite work for a ton of reasons. Like they're not grounded in any story arc that we can perceive yet. There's no music in any of them. They're usually one tiny cut in between things that have nothing to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
They're strange.
It is odd. I don't entirely know. And again, sorry to keep going back to this, but that's another reason I said that film thing is that again, like conceivably, if you could string together all of the little just Jerry Horne bits throughout one continuous length thing, maybe that would paint more of a picture of something.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe not though. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, just the way television usually works is like and this is how Twin Peaks worked. I've mentioned this before. The original Twin Peaks is, at any given sort of several episode long arc of a season, you have some collection of characters that you are largely catching up on. And every week you tune in, it's like, I am going to then see what's going on with this character. But that is just absolutely not how
a few of these threads have no setup, especially Jerry Horne. Like, what is Jerry Horne's purpose? We didn't really get a kickoff. We just started off with him hanging out in Ben's office being a weed man. Mm-hmm. And he sort of just continued to ambiently be a weed man. Who knows?
Yeah.
Ben Horne, this episode, though, we actually...
Much bigger.
Yeah, we started to actually sort of get a foothold into something with him. With him and his... not assistant, but some coworker at the Great Northern, played by Ashley Judd, whose name I can't remember. Beverly, right. That scene of them chasing the hum around her office actually was pretty good. I thought like that was a version of the sort of random cut into two characters.
I agree.
That felt totally earned and
I think
good.
It was really, really sold by all of Ben Horne's sort of classic little sly like arch one eye in this direction, like look over here, could it be there? He's really good at that sort of both sort of underplayed and overplayed like physical acting.
Yep.
Where he's intrigued by something.
There was something it felt like between him and Beverly, but it was way more of he's like an old guy who's still a charmer and not he's a lecherous, slightly rapey man who owns an over the border illegal club. I was worried
about how it was going to go, and it was fine.
Yeah. You got the impression that this was a slightly more relaxed, perhaps post-soul searching Ben Horne,
right?
And a little bit
runs a chiller workplace.
Mm-hmm. But who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Knows?
Yeah, it seems like it's possible he may have settled into.
It's just the weed now. It's just the pot farm, and no longer
a sort of always on the cusp of a rapacious empire.
Yeah. The hum in the walls, did you have any read on what that would be?
I assumed it was because of the presence of the key, but I don't know.
God, I thought you were about to say I assumed it was because of the presence of Jodie Packard's ghost.
Oh, man. For all we know.
That was Josie's hum.
Yeah.
In the wood.
Yeah.
The other possibility, I was thinking about, why do things in the walls of the Great Northern seem familiar to me? And it's that over seasons 1 and 2, no, I mean things being literally inside the walls. Audrey used to totally climb around inside Ben Horne's office.
That's true.
And there's clearly like the Great Northern is just full of weird in the wall secret passages. So the idea that there could physically be something. This could be one of those times in Twin Peaks where there's a weird Lynchian moment where there's just a strange ambient noise, but then it's also revealed to be like a tape recorder whose motor has gone wrong or something like later on, or it could be a ghost. It could be anything.
It seemed like it was reacting to where they were going.
It did.
Yeah.
It also seemed, potentially like it was connected to Cooper's room key being back in that room.
That was what I figured. Yeah.
But also, knows? Cooper's room key comes back, and it felt for half a second like it was going to die on the vine. With like, oh, that's that room key, weird. And then right at the end of the scene, Ben pockets it and walks out.
Mm-hmm. I was glad he did that.
Yeah. Just like, no.
Yeah. Do you want to then just sort of cap that off with Beverly going home, and we were introduced? We ended up getting an actual introduction to this character. She is the wife of a man with some kind of chronic illness.
Yep. Named Tom.
Who it seems as can happen with these things has put their marriage under strain.
He seemed convinced that her being gone for a while was an indication that she was maybe having an affair or doing something just unrelated. I mean, he was being very passive-aggressively accusatory, and then she, justifiably, at least it seems right now, dressed him down for it.
Yeah, yep. And that's all we got.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in Twin Peaks, Andy is doing some policing. I guess we first check in with Andy talking to who seems to be the owner of that truck that Richard Horne used to run down the kid and also used to drive to his meeting with fake Hank.
I don't really understand why Andy didn't say we're going down to the station right now. He's
I know.
The owner of the truck that was used in a hit and run, right?
Yeah, it was really strange that guy seemed so worried and Andy just bought into it. This is kind of crass to say, but it felt like that all happened. I mean, well, it just felt like it all happened so that guy could go missing. But
sure, yeah.
But in the process of doing that, Andy made sure that their meeting was as like Twin Peaks symbol and lore heavy as possible. It's like, let's meet on the old road next to Sparkwood and 21, and let's meet at 4:30, the time that is the number as the giant said in the beginning of episode 1. I'll make sure that I'm doing all of those things so that at that precise coordinates and that precise time, I can look anxious and something bad can happen to you back at your house.
Right.
All of those individual moments were cool, but it felt like it was very constructed from the back to make all of it happen as opposed to it feeling natural.
It's weird to see Andy, that character, kind of at the nexus of a bunch of weird Twin Peaks lore callbacks.
Yeah.
Because that character typically, I don't think, has had much
he's
awareness
usually sort of stumbling off to the periphery of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and, to his credit, Andy and the actor, played it as a very casual thing where he didn't, there was no winking imbuing of meaning in it when he was saying it, but it was these are a lot of notable words coming out of your mouth right now, dude. Yeah.
So Lieutenant Knox investigating Briggs fingerprints.
Yeah, I will just by and large, even though I feel like we've come down kind of negative on all of the stuff happening inside of the town of Twin Peaks this episode, I feel like we've had a relatively muted
I don't
tone.
know. I really liked the Horne stuff.
Yeah.
And I liked a lot of what was going on with Hawk and Truman.
Yeah, it was all good, but it made me miss Cooper. The end. Yeah. So the body of Briggs, investigated by Lieutenant Knox.
Mm-hmm.
This again just felt like more setup and knockdown of plot that has been bubbling across this season. Actually, this reminds me of a large overall impression that you and I started with when season 3 started, and we were talking about the Secret History of Twin Peaks book. We had said we're going to feel comfortable spoiling the contents of the book on this show because it's not worth speculating as to which pieces of it are relevant, because the things that are relevant are just going to be aired out in full in the show, and the things that aren't relevant, the show is going to ignore.
Right.
And this episode has made me feel like that about this entire season of Twin Peaks, where there's all these details scattered throughout the show, and there's all these things to speculate about, and I feel as the host of a podcast, part of my job is to write down and surface as many of those details back into the consciousness as I can. This episode has basically been a statement, unilaterally, if a detail is important, a character is going to straight up bring it back as the most straightforward piece of forensic evidence. This is a big clue, and then we'll specifically ask ourselves what it means. Laura Palmer's diary, the way that showed up, the way that Cooper's fingerprints are explained, the way that Major Briggs's body and the backstory of it is explained. We have characters now that are actually these details are the ones that we are going to care about, and we're going to move forward and process them. And it's
right. Yeah. Anything that 1 episode ago, 2 episodes ago, 3 episodes ago, people were sort of saying if you note this detail, this is this. If it matters, characters will straight up.
Yeah, I'm feeling more confident in the show not being sort of ethereal and nebulous with that stuff. And that's an element of Twin Peaks, the original run, that I think you could feel very comfortable at that too. For all of its weirdness, the actual mystery was going to keep being brought up and processed by the sort of investigatory threads and the law enforcement characters. And for this show, this season being even way farther out into total abstract madness, the sort of plotty clue mystery stuff feels like it's taking its time getting there, but I'm feeling less anxious about the fact that stuff is going to continue to hold together. Yeah, because it's been a source of anxiety for me over the course of the show of just all these things keep coming up. Are they going to talk about them? Okay,
right. Well, and then sometimes you'll go several episodes without it being addressed.
Yeah, but now this episode was a lot of it was just concrete, almost expositionary conversations about this stuff. We were wondering, are they going to float over how notable it is that this body is Major Briggs? Is it weird that, what was up with the 16 different fingerprint hits,
Right,
and then this
right,
time
right.
it's like, okay, it is actually that those were all potentially either old prints or weird, something else. This is unique. This is Major Briggs'
Right.
body. It's
or was it this guy who, like, this body, whether it's actually Briggs or some weird doppelganger or something,
Right.
present at all those scenes? I mean, we don't know, but there's definitely some more concrete information is being.
Yeah, this is
chucked
this is
out.
the first time that a human hand bearing those fingerprints has shown up.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's a man in his late 40s, which seems like that must have been what Major Briggs was in the original run of the show. Late 40s. I mean, or if maybe
Yeah,
he was
I
in his early 50s.
early 50s,
It's hard
yeah.
to know because
Yeah.
Don Davis was a heavyset bald man, so you
Right.
can't actually
It's
tell.
Tough to pinpoint.
And also, the actor who plays his son is way older than the character he's supposed to be playing. Like Bobby is supposed to be someone who's 16 or 17.
That's true. That's
but
a
he's
good
an
point.
actor who's
Yeah.
clearly in his early 20s.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, late 40s, I think, makes sense for Briggs.
Was he somehow stuck in another place? Was he stuck in a lodge type scenario, or what? Yeah, is this a doppelganger who didn't age, or who knows what it is?
Mm-hmm.
We know that we have actual physical evidence of his body. Also in these scenes, that sort of weird blackened figure from Bill Hastings' jail
Yeah,
cell was
yeah.
creeping around in a Lynchian way in
Oh,
the
yeah.
background, and it
Total
was really
Mulholland Drive moment.
scary.
Yeah,
The
when
way
it's
that he
still a
managed
blurry,
the way that he managed
yeah.
the rack focus to sort of slowly but never quite reveal him, or that the camera would start having a move that feels unmotivated, and then you realize that it was actually sort of tracking him behind the wall as he walks past the door and continues to move, was like, yeah,
That was
that
really,
character's
really
presence
good.
in the background
Yeah.
of those scenes was
Yeah.
really good. And how Lieutenant Knox, when she's on the phone to Ernie Hudson's character,
Davis.
to Davis, yeah, she
Well,
kind
also, by the way, the last name of Don Davis.
oh
right?
yeah,
the character who
right,
plays
that's got to
Major
be a Don
Briggs.
Davis
Actor who plays Major Briggs. Yeah.
reference. How she sort of becomes aware of that guy in the background, but not doesn't address him or turn to face him, just sort of like anxiously and passively leaves the scene, and then the camera reveals him. Like she notices that he's there,
Yeah.
but it's just like
But since
I'm
she
gonna
doesn't know
leave.
she's in a creepy TV show,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily
It's just
occur
like,
to her to.
there's just a thing back there that's bad,
Yeah.
bad guy. That scene in general was really good.
I thought it was great.
Like,
yeah, I thought it was great.
good tone, the weird plot stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's the closest bridge to
Cole, Albert, Diane.
to the what is sort of the continuous, like the longest continuous chain in this episode, I think, which is this going from the FBI guys going to Diane and then them going to South Dakota to talk to Coop.
That thread opens with Gordon Cole alone in his office, sort of practicing whistling trills.
What is he whistling? Do you know?
I mean, they're just little trills. It looks like he's practicing his ability to, like, do a tight trill.
I bet
and
that's a
whistle.
reference to like some either old song or a film
could
score
well-
or something.
could well
I
be, yeah.
bet that it is, but
Yeah.
I couldn't place it because I don't know, because I'm a failure.
A thing I really so he's
With
whistling
that corn
away
on the wall.
What's that?
Well, he's got that corn, or he has a big old ear of corn on the wall,
Oh, I didn't even notice that. I was
Yeah.
just noticing the massive
and then
mushroom cloud.
he's got that mushroom cloud. Yeah,
Uh,
that was a good shot.
My favorite part about that first scene is that Albert comes in,
Mm-hmm.
says, she stonewalled me, basically. And Cole it's determined Cole is going to go visit Diane.
Yeah.
And he says, you'll come with me, right? And Albert says,
Say please.
And then Cole's like, what? You heard me.
Yeah.
Please. Like, that was amazing.
Yeah,
That
really good.
Just like Albert Albert
He's like, I'm not
knows
humoring you.
How
I'm not-
much he's bullshitted by this guy constantly with
Yep.
his hearing aid, and it was not having it. And I thought that was an amazing,
Yep.
decades long payoff.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
Yep. Gordon Cole continues to deliver as
Yeah.
a highly watchable character in
Mm-hmm.
this season of Twin Peaks.
Yep. So they meet up with Diane in her apartment. She dismisses her
Her man.
her man, whatever description, and she agrees.
Yeah. Laura Dern's look in this show is, she looks like she's playing a Diane very much, the things that she says, the way that she carries herself, and also just her look, a Diane who has very much had a hard 25 years.
Yeah.
And I think if you haven't seen Laura Dern in other stuff in the last decade, this is not what Laura Dern usually looks like.
Yeah.
Like she was in
Big Little Lies.
Little Lies. I can
Yeah.
never remember which way it goes.
Yeah.
And She
also plays sort of a harried character in that show more than often.
But she carries herself the way that you sort of think of Laura Dern in most of her film roles.
Yeah.
And seeing her like with that wig and the way that her makeup's done and the way that she just carries her face, like she just looks like time has hit her harder than it usually does.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and that's how she plays every line, and that's how, you know.
I know. I only mention it in case people haven't been paying attention to Laura Dern, because there's some characters in this show who show up and it's just like, wow, you're old. I mean, everyone's looking good in Twin Peaks, but it's sometimes hard to know how much of it is the character they're playing versus just like what has happened to them.
Sure.
Which I guess is a specifically interesting thing to say, given the things that she says about why she knows that that Bad Coop is not who he is. She specifically says, like, it's not just the way that he talked, and it's not just the way that he changed because of time. This is not the same person. Like, this is not...
Well, she says it's like something's missing here.
Something's missing
like
here. Yeah. Let's go back to them having coffee in Diane's house.
Oh, I mean...
They do.
Yeah, they have that. Well, so Cole, there's one thing I wanted to highlight, which is that Cole says, you know, he says something's wrong here and we need your help. And he says, it involves something you know about, and that's enough said about that, which is a very Gordon Cole thing. But it implies that Diane, I mean, it doesn't imply, it outright states that Diane knows something about this weird situation that Cole also is aware of, and none of this has been explicitly vocalized to us, the audience. I mean, we know more than they do from a certain angle, but they also know things about this that they have not shared with us. And I just wanted to mention that.
And whatever that means in the specifics, it's enough to get Diane on a plane to South Dakota, because the next thing that we see is an establishing shot of a plane.
Yeah.
A very weird establishing shot of a plane, because the windows keep blinking in and out. And it's really hard to know if that was the sun, supposed to be the sun reflecting off them, but it seems like it's not. It seems like it looks like the windows are literally disappearing off of the fuselage of the plane in a way that feels like digital flickering or something. Like it looks like they're just not able to maintain their presence. Someone on the Idle Thumbs forum said, "I wonder what the windows disappearing would sound like if played on a flute," which is hilarious to me. What if it turns out to be Wyndham Earle's melodies played to Leo?
It's what Cole was practicing whistling in his office. So on the plane, Tammy Preston shows Cole and Albert, I guess, both of them.
Yes, she shows that one of the fingers is flipped. Albert, this is again one of those things where she was looking at the print and everyone's like, what does it mean? And Cooper said a word backwards in the interrogation. Everyone said, what is it? What is it? Is this just weird Lynchian nonsense? And then straight up Albert says, it looks like someone at the prison really crappily flipped one of Cooper's prints to make it match the regular Cooper, but it's been clearly reversed because the ID number was reversed. Yeah. And at the time, everyone was like, was that just bad graphics?
Yeah, someone thought that was a production mistake.
Yeah, and they specifically called it out. And then Gordon very specifically refers back to, he didn't greet me properly because Cooper's, it is very, very nice to see you, Gordon, or whatever. Yeah. One of the varies is backwards.
Yep.
And Gordon says you rev, like he specifically calls that out, and then has Preston put out her hands and counts them out, and the backwards word in the 10-sentence or in the 10-word greeting lines up to the backwards fingerprint. Who knows what that means? But
and he's got some like new age, like this is your whatever,
your spirit mound or whatever, and
what it was.
And that that means something to Gordon, but it at least explicitly now coded as these characters who know a bunch about this situation understand that something is wrong, and they have these specific points that we've been seeing. Again, it was just sort of like, it was reassuring to me.
For sure. At that point, we're getting into a level of investigation that is in line with, for instance, Cooper's Tibetan rock throwing or something. Like, it doesn't matter if we necessarily understand exactly what Cole means, but in the world of Twin Peaks, someone has an observation that surely means something.
The investigation starts from a sort of starting point that is very spiritual and not concrete, but from there we move in a very concrete and sort of classic investigative way.
Yep.
And you see some really good distant shots of kind of Diane's point of view. I mean, it's showing her, but she's sort of looking over her shoulder at that stuff. And though their conversation about the fingerprints and about this Cooper is clearly really meaningful to her, like you can see her mind churning through it.
So they arrive at the prison. She sort of, sets terms for talking to Cooper, is granted them.
Yeah, and then Cole says, you're in control of the microphone and the screen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, she has an experience with Bad Coop that is very much in line with the one Bad Coop had with Cole.
It's way more personal, though.
It is way more personal.
Like, way more personal.
No, it's true. It's true.
It's
way more personal, except that it's entirely impersonal. Right?
Yeah, but her reactions to all the things that he's saying.
Yes.
I mean, the implication is, I think, that she has had an encounter with Doppelganger Cooper after Cooper disappeared, and is kind of
Oh, really?
That was my feeling on that.
I totally didn't. That was not what I took away. But that's
he's talking about the first thing that she asks is, "When did you see me last?"
Yeah.
You know, he keeps saying, "Are you upset with me? I think you're upset." And she keeps saying, "When did you last see me?"
Yeah, and he says, "At your house."
At your house,
which isn't an answer to when. That's just an answer to where.
Right.
Kind of,
but then what does Cooper say? His implication was that it was memorable in a way that sort of sounds like he's twisting a knife, and she says, "I'll never forget it," in a way that sounds like it was a thing that was not good.
Yeah, he says, "I'll always remember that night," and she says, "I'll never forget it."
And that seemed to me like she had an encounter with Bad Coop. Like she had an encounter with Doppelganger Cooper, and then when she's doing that debrief with Gordon, and she says he's missing something right here. He says, "Is there something you want to tell me about what you were talking about?" And she doesn't straight up refuse. She says,
"We'll have a talk sometime."
We'll have a talk sometime.
Yeah. That's interesting because I guess it makes sense logically given the events of Twin Peaks that she would have had an encounter with Doppelganger Coop, because presumably they were not yet on bad terms during the run of the show, and there wouldn't have been any other opportunity for them to encounter each other. Nonetheless, it seems weird that when she says he has something missing, does she mean as of when they had that meeting? I thought she meant as of now.
Well, yeah, the arc that I thought was possible was that she had a meeting with Doppelganger Cooper, with Bad Coop right after the events of Twin Peaks, and whatever it went really badly.
Yeah.
And was sort of like a destructive element in her life. But at that point, maybe the differences between that Cooper, it was just like, God, what is going on with Cooper?
Yeah.
And now she's seeing him again 25 years later and is like, oh, okay. Like the thing that happened 25 years ago, 24 years ago, whatever, that happened way back in the time that made me cut all ties with all of these people.
Yeah.
Might have been way more messed up than I thought that it was. Like that.
Yeah.
That thought was, I think, what being coupled with Doppelganger Cooper going to visit Audrey makes all that stuff seem really uncomfortable and not great to me. That, like, does Doppelganger Cooper, Bad Coop, whatever, go and basically pay visits to all of the people who are close to real Cooper and just do destructive things?
You're right.
I don't know. I hope that it doesn't. I hope that the show isn't implying that he literally just goes and assaults all of these people. But it feels like there was some undercurrent there.
No,
I don't know.
That's interesting. I mean, I think that's really well argued. Is absolutely not what my takeaway was, but I think you might be right.
I'm sure we'll find out,
because as we know
this far into this show,
yeah.
it's gonna just. These are the sorts of questions that it seems like it's going to answer. Whether or not we learn anything about Agent Cooper at any goddamn moment, who knows? But the clues that it's laying down, it seems interested in picking up.
Yep.
And it wouldn't drop something like this without getting into it. Whether or not we like where it goes on a plot level or a creative decision level is to be seen. But
speaking of Cooper, you want to talk about Cooper as Dougie?
Well, no, you're jumping ahead because there's all of the other Bad Coop stuff after.
Oh, of course, yeah, right.
They leave. Cole says to the warden,
"Keep him here.
We're done, but keep him here." And then the warden immediately goes back on his word because of Mr. Strawberry because Cooper says, "I want to talk to the warden," and he just gets his wish immediately.
Yeah.
The warden turns off the security cameras, and then Cooper implies... He doesn't imply... Well, he states, by way of dropping a few clues, that he has some major dirt...
Joe McCluskey.
Yeah.
Who I can't tell if Joe McCluskey is Mr. Strawberry or if that is a separate thing.
Is Mr. Strawberry the dog?
Oh, the dog with the 4 legs
and
the 3 legs?
Yeah. He says that there's the one dog leg that was found in his car, which was gross when he was arrested, that he sent the other 3 legs along with copies of some sort of information, presumably about the warden.
Yeah.
To sources who will do something if Cooper doesn't get what he wants.
Presumably go public with that information.
Yeah. We don't really know what's up with the warden, but Cooper sort of says, like, there's 2 guys who will not be involved or whatever. Like, there's just... I'm sure, again, whatever these threats are will either be made material later, or we are just right now supposed to just take from it Bad Coop has leverage against the warden and seems to know that this is the correctional facility he would have ended up in, or the holding cell that he would have ended up in, because he has a big old plan. Then he and his minion get let out and drive away in a rental car.
He and Ray Monroe.
Yep.
Who's been a sort of like background present character through the entire season.
Yeah.
Occasionally in relation to Bad Coop.
Yep.
When he says, this is such a stupid question. When he says, "I want a friend in the glove compartment," is that a gun? Is that what that means?
I think so. That was my read on that as well.
Figured. It was just, what's the point of being euphemistic at that point?
Yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
And then when he leaves, there's some ominous humming and buzzing sound effects as he drives away.
Yeah. All right. So now
that's one of our two Coopers.
Yeah.
Now let's go to Dougie.
Dougie Cooper.
Excuse me, Douglas Jones,
Douglas
as we learn
Jones.
his full name is on his office wall.
Speaking of his office wall, actually.
Oh man, Mad Men.
Yes. That is not what I was going to bring up, but that is important.
Where are you going to go? What are you talking about?
This is an email from Adam Linnell.
Okay.
Who says, "How about Philip Jeffries coming off the elevator on the 7th floor at the Philadelphia FBI office in Fire Walk with Me, and Dougie's office being on the 7th floor in The Return?"
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, just a little bit of resonance there, as this season is obsessed with stuff like that. So worth mentioning, I think.
Also, this is probably not deliberate, but the art hanging in the...
I don't know.
You never know.
I bet it is.
You think it is? You don't think it's just that it was from the same prop warehouse?
I think it's deliberate.
There's like a piece of art hanging up in, I guess, Dougie's office. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is the same piece of art that's in the Sterling Cooper like boardroom in some seasons of Mad Men, like in the scene when Don Draper is pitching the Hershey's stuff and telling the story about his life.
Yeah, when he breaks down.
Yeah, when he breaks down in one of the later Mad Men seasons. That same art is up on the wall in Dougie's office.
Filmy Girl writes, there are two things I haven't seen discussed, but I'd love to get your take on them. David Lynch is a huge Mad Men fan.
Huh, okay.
Does that change how you see the Dougie story at all, to see it through that lens? I can't help but see Dougie as a kind of Lynchian take on the utter vapidness of Don Draper. And then she has a different point, which is more general.
Oh man, crazy. Okay, because I had seen Lynch say when people were asking him, because people, reporters trying to get a sense on early on in Twin Peaks season 3 of just how this fits into sort of modern golden age of TV, whatever. And they asked David Lynch what he thinks about that, and he didn't really give an answer, but he said, "I love Mad Men and I love Breaking Bad." Yeah, and that's all that he said.
I love that. Just the two, like,
and he just names like the two biggest ones.
I know, like,
like the two, at least non-HBO stuff, but just like
television.
Yeah. But hearing that he's actually a big Mad Men fan makes that. I mean, the thing is, when he says that sort of thing, it always sounds like a weird, goofy David Lynch throwaway thing. But it also is probably true that he watched all of Mad Men and all of Breaking Bad.
Yeah. It's also, I just can't imagine a production design decision like that being just coincidental and accidental. I mean,
hopefully it was Lynch saying, "I want that poster in Dougie's wall," like when pointing, like he's brought a printout of a scene from Mad Men. Yeah, Faces of Stone. Yeah. Anyway, what happens in this scene?
Well, before that, we get Janie E at the statue waiting. For him, and then it's Cooper at his desk. And the guy being like, "So what's up? How's it going?"
Right, and then it cuts to her being outside again, and then she walks in.
Right.
Then Cooper again is just sort of vaguely gouging the pen into the desk and has drawn something new on the pages that we don't get a good look at.
And the police arrive.
Yes.
In a weird scene in which there's three police. It's like one of these classic Twin Peaks season 3 scenes in which everything is incredibly drawn out, as aided by Cooper's inability to sort of cogently respond to anyone.
And there's 3 police officers, all of whom seem to be acting in unison sometimes. I think they all have the same name.
What? You better actually double check this before we... They're all named Chet.
I'm pretty sure they're all named Deputy Chet. I'm nearly certain that is the case, and I'll verify that.
All right.
But
We get increasingly everyone surrounding Dougie is sort of like all contributing to somehow allow Cooper to just barely exist as someone who isn't just institutionalized immediately. Like
this is all of the scenes in this episode were Dougie's closest scrapes by far, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, not that means anything.
Except for when he ducks a sniper rifle.
Oh yeah.
Might be Dougie's closest scrape.
Fair enough. Anytime that you think that maybe there's some aggressive forward velocity in the Dougie Jones story, there isn't.
Yeah.
she fills in for him as the wife who just sort of is impatiently answering all of the questions. And then Dougie's echoing conveniently just adds emphasis in a way that makes him seem like a strong-willed but quiet character.
Right. There's one very tiny thing I wanted to point out because I loved it. It's a very small detail on it. I doubt it's plot related at all, but I enjoyed it enormously, which is when they ask Cooper to describe Dougie's car, and he obviously can't because he can't really do anything. And Janie replies, "It's a terrible car," which is exactly what she says.
She clearly
to the
just hates that car. Yeah,
who's just like, "We're poor people or whatever. We drive terrible cars." Which even at the time I pulled that out as a turn of phrase that I loved. We drive terrible cars.
Yeah,
and now it's a terrible car.
Yeah,
it's always in the shop. It is so specific. And I love that
it is a dumpy
back.
car, and it has that annoying vanity plate. She probably just thinks that car is a piece of crap.
Yeah, I know, but
it's really good.
It's a terrible car. I love it.
When she says it was stolen, and all three of the police officers pull their reporters' notebooks out at the exact same time, a classic Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
thing.
that is totally true.
Those characters would be at home, walking around in the Great Northern Hotel, basically at any time in previous Twin Peaks. Yeah, they get out of that. Go downstairs, and then what's the guy's name?
Ike the Spike.
Ike the Spike shows up.
Cooper immediately disarms him.
Yeah, in the most badass way possible. And then in the middle of the struggle, the arm pops up and starts screaming, "Squeeze his hands off!" Right? That's what he's yelling.
Something like that. Yeah, I couldn't.
And it seems like it's an aggressively violent request that could be interpreted to just mean pry the gun out of his hand.
Yeah.
Cooper does pry the gun out of his hand, and then we get an amazing TV news featurette about it for a second.
Handheld documentary footage segment that was so weird.
It was really good.
Yeah,
and then you see people peeling what looks like a little bit of skin off of the gun or whatever that was.
I thought it was maybe the Garmin Bozia stuff. I couldn't really tell.
To me, it's a piece of meat.
Yeah.
Did we ever talk about that? There's the little piece of flesh in Bill Hastings' car is what this looked like to me. It looked a ton like that.
Oh, it
didn't.
I didn't.
Like that little scrap that was in Bill Hastings' car. The blinking light was on.
Yeah.
When David Lynch was asked about that, I think in an interview after that episode debuted at Cannes in France, they're like, "Is that human flesh? Is it animal?
What, is it meant to be part of a thigh?
And then David Lynch was just saying it's a piece of meat, and they're like, "Oh, but I mean, could it be this? I thought it was that." He said.
To me,
it's a piece of meat. To me, I mean, you can think that, but it looked very much like that.
I didn't.
But who knows what it was? It was just some sort of
it looked
organic
more
matter
encrusted to me. Than a piece
I
of
was
flesh.
did Dougie crush that? Did he actually squeeze his hand off it to the point that he fused the guy's flesh to it?
Yeah.
Or did he leave something behind?
Yeah.
Something gross was peeled off that gun.
Yeah, and collected as evidence.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's all of the big threads this week.
I think it is. This episode's already running long, so
let's talk. So speaking of things that run long,
oh my God, yeah.
Let's talk about this roadhouse scene.
I loved this.
You loved it. I had an arc. I went through an arc of this of I love this. I hate it. I love it.
Surely that was intended, right?
Yes.
And that's kind of how a joke that runs too long is that's the arc you're supposed to have.
It was the scene that I wanted to see, even though it was eating up a lot of time. We're getting some incredible default choices of music here. I mean, they're good, but Take 5 and Green Onions are some pretty surface level needle drop tracks.
Yeah.
But whatever. Did the guy sweeping up all of the mess on the floor into a neat pile feel like an analogy to you for this episode and sort of for where we are in the story, or did that just I don't know if anything is meant that directly, but sort of this episode felt so much like all of the weird stuff that's been going on was mopped up and organized, and then the episode effectively nearly ends with a shot of someone sweeping up a mess.
Yeah.
But whatever. That probably isn't meant that directly, but
sure,
it was a good shot regardless of that.
Yeah, I appreciated how that the only thing in the shot was this character methodically sweeping up, and it was utterly naturalistic. There was something sort of very un-TV like about watching someone just perform a workman-like task completely naturally.
Especially after this episode that was barreled through a bunch of very stylized, heavy-hitting plot to then just be like, all right, we're not going to have a band this week, but we're going to have a guy sweeping the floor. But then at the end, there's going to be a cherry on top of a lascivious Renault.
Yep. Still apparently like trafficking in teen girls.
The Renaults are, I guess now just confirmed to be the heart of all criminal anything, including the Renault family has owned this bar for
57 years.
57 years.
Yeah.
There's always a Renault, always chuckling to himself and saying sleazy things about trafficking women.
Mm-hmm. And then we end in the double R with the instrumental track Sleepwalk playing. Yet another very widely used piece of music.
But it was kind of like it had other stuff coming in on it, and I couldn't tell what was going on.
There was some, as the scene went on, there was some, what I assume to be sort of Badalamenti or David Lynch, because David Lynch often does that drone stuff, sort of stuff just fading in a bit. But yeah, definitely. And
it was another sort of just long naturalistic shot of just Twin Peaks going about its life.
It opened with a guy like slamming into the door and being like, has anyone seen, I thought he said Philly. I saw someone
said his name is Bing.
Bing, I saw that as well. Yeah, I don't know.
Bing was a credited character playing in one of the Roadhouse bands, apparently, in an earlier episode.
Oh, that's funny. And then just silent shot of the double R with music for the whole time.
Yep.
The only reason I wanted it anyway to mention the song Sleepwalk, not song, there's no singing, but the instrumental track Sleepwalk that was playing without any firm conclusions at all. I wanted to just bring up the notion of sleeping and dreams. You know, in the original run of Twin Peaks, especially if you can sort of try and put yourself in the mind of watching it before the existence of the entire run of Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me and Season 3, a lot of what we refer to as being in the Red Room was sort of thought of as like Cooper's dream. In fact, I think that's what the weird German title of maybe episode 3 was.
And, you know, like the tracks that play in association with who people now call the Man from Another Place. He was originally referred to as the Dream Man by Angela Badalamenti, like all of that stuff.
And over time, obviously over the course of the run of Twin Peaks and the film, that stuff got very much formalized into this is a place. It deals with, there's a particular mythology around it. You can go to it.
Like
you
this
can
season explicitly has human
and
bodies pop in and out of it.
Yeah, like it is very, but you know, for a while in Twin Peaks, that stuff was the province of a more subjective kind of dream reality. And I just wanted to bring that up in the context, not in this context, but just that song, that music being called Sleepwalk just reminds me, oh, right, that is something that was a sort of foundational part of Twin Peaks and is, I think, just worth keeping in mind as we have this character, Cooper, as Dougie, sort of existing almost himself in a waking dream state. And that's all I really wanted to say about that. There was a good post on the Idle forums on last week's episode sort of postulating that everything that Cooper is going through right now could in fact be more explicitly an actual dream state, which is very much related to Mike screaming at him, like, don't die, wake up, wake up, which I thought was compelling. And so if you want to go, I mean, in general, the Idle forums have a lot of great discussion on them in the Twin Peaks Rewatch subforum. I just wanted to bring that up as a general sort of thing in my brain.
I'm increasingly of the belief that the Cooper Dougie stuff is tangibly taking place in our world. But
I think so too. I think that is
the room key dropping on Ben Horne's desk this week, I think, was I
agree.
Cemented all of this as taking place inside of one spatial reality, but that doesn't mean that sort of just metaphorically and aesthetically the Dougie stuff isn't.
Yes, that's why I'm not going to like read that whole theory verbatim. But it's not so much that I think that he actually is literally in a dream. But I think that in how we think about it can be
the sort of there's a lot of rebirth and sleeping and awakening, both language and metaphor and visuals. And also the show is called Twin Peaks The Return, which could just be a marketing phrase the same way as like Mystery Science Theater 3000 The Return is the name of that new season on Netflix. But it's feeling more and more like The Return is actually referring to Cooper's journey back out.
Yeah.
Which we're at the end of the show, so I will say I've been hanging on to the Dougie stuff, and I do really like it, but man, it is getting tough for me to not have Cooper. I mean, I talked about that in the beginning in terms of the forensic stuff, but just like we're now at a point where basically every thread in this episode made me just go, man, I wish Cooper was here. I wish Cooper was here. I wish Cooper was here for the Major Briggs stuff. I wish he was here for the investigation in the FBI. I wish he was in Twin Peaks for everything that's happening in Twin Peaks. I just wish Cooper was there.
And every episode we get something that points to Cooper possibly returning to his functional self, but it never actually happens.
It's so tough.
Yeah.
Diane saying that like the heart is missing is so true of just the show itself without Cooper in it. And I mean, they're clearly aware of it and they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
But it is tough.
Yeah.
And it is above all else the thing that makes me wish that I could just watch all of Twin Peaks season 3, understand the shape of what they're doing with the story, and then be able to sort of process it as a complete work. I'm looking forward to that so much at this point.
Me too.
Oh my God.
Speaking of actually being able to rewatch this show, here's an email from Gordon who says, "Hi, Chris and Jake.
Gordon.
A small but interesting detail I saw during the scene between Dougie and Ike the Spike is that immediately after Dougie fights off Ike and Janie E. is hugging Dougie in the foreground, the camera pans and a group of bystanders comes into the background. One of these men, an older white man, black suit, white shirt, red tie, enters the scene from behind a sculpture and walks into the center of the screen. He is missing his left arm."
Whoa.
I didn't catch it on my first viewing, but on the second time, I was amazed. I was amazed I hadn't noticed it. He walks right into the middle of the scene, windowed by Dougie and Janie E. looking at each other. Considering the pop-up appearance of the arm moments earlier, it's hard not to see this as intentional. Best, Gordon.
Crazy.
Yeah. Lots to notice.
Yeah. This episode felt more than many since the beginning of the season like it was Frost and Lynch both going nuts aggressively. And that email, well, not the most potent example of that, is kind of an example of that. Mm-hmm. Just like, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this episode of Twin Peaks other than the hole in the heart. Have you got any more emails?
One more, actually,
Okay.
that... This is the other point by Filmy Girl who wrote in about the Mad Men thing.
Okay.
And this sort of relates to what we've been talking about, I think. She says, "This current season seems almost designed to resist the kind of trite play-by-play recapping you see on so many websites. How do you think it affects the overall understanding of the show, if at all, to try and read everything extremely literally, knowing that Lynch specializes in dream logic and the uncanny?"
It's tough. I'll say doing a podcast about this season is really tough.
Yep.
I mean, we talk about trying to resist speculation, and you have to just draw the line between trying to spin out theories and assuming that if this means this, then therefore maybe this will happen, and instead just talking about what you have and being comfortable with each week we're just going to spend an hour in the unknown and I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I it's true, and it's weird having Twin Peaks exist in the era of internet recap culture, which is absolutely a massive presence in the world of television appreciation and dispersal. I mean, it's every show that has any appreciable fan base at all at this point has an entire little cottage industry of recapping, spanning amateurs like us to major newspapers every week, and it is established itself as, I think, the default way to disseminate criticism of television, and that it's one of those things that happens regardless of whether it's appropriate for the show or not, because it's just how television is received now, at least in the context of published writing.
Yep.
And so it's going to happen with this show as any other. And who knows if that even makes any sense with this show.
It's been interesting because, I mean, our show is named Twin Peaks Rewatch. We started this as a rewatch show. We started it as a show built to discuss a television program and movie that had been out in the world for years, and we were going to reevaluate it and sort of rewatch it for ourselves, knowing everything that's been out there. Mm-hmm. And that was such a different mode to be in than this one, where we're watching, we're being drip-fed a complete work and not being able to see the entire shape of it and not having context.
When we did the original run, I did not feel like a sort of modern television recapper.
Yeah.
Doing this, I absolutely do.
Yeah.
It's a really really different mind space.
Yep. Yeah. It's fun to do, but I feel like we're doing the show a disservice and being irresponsible to the people who are watching it when we go so far out on a limb and try to act like sages who can tell people what anything means, because I feel like, in all honesty, no one knows what any of this stuff,
that's true.
where it's
of
going,
course.
and which things are a big deal, which things are a small deal. You just can't. Some people obviously are doing a better job at being sort of prognosticators than others, but.
I mean, I also have fairly little interest in prognosticating.
No, what's
personally,
interesting to me is talking about just the experience of watching the show and sort of how things struck me as they happened and what came to mind at the time, and not being able to look forward, because we're just going to get proven wrong over and over again. Yep.
On that, thank you for joining us again on Twin Peaks Rewatch. I'm sorry this episode went so long.
Don't apologize.
I guess there was a lot to talk about. I'm sure that will not stop it being the case. Please join us next week as we discuss Part 8 of The Return. If you like this show, if it's been enjoyable for you to follow along with the new season of Twin Peaks, tell a friend. If you liked our rewatch of the original series, pass that along too. It means a lot to us when you do. If you found us through YouTube, thanks for checking us out there. That's a whole new audience for us. We're on iTunes, everywhere else. Our website is twinpeaksrewatch.com. You can send us email at twinpeaks@idlethumbs.net. And that's that. For Idle Thumbs, I'm Chris Remo.
I'm Jake Rodkin.
Talk to you next week.
Bye.